Making a multiplayer game is not only difficult because of the technical side, but also there's a surprising challenge in that you need to keep a player base going in order to have enough people to actually interact with.
So async PvP helps solve that because when I'm playing my game and I submit my team for round seven, that goes into a database. And then somebody else, when they're playing their game with round seven, will face my team. But the nice part is we don't have to be online at the same time. So it reduces the need for having a large player base because essentially there's an opponent that's always available.
That was Charlie, and he is working on a teamfight tactics like game called Flawed Tactics. Now, he has found a really clever solution to this second part of the multiplayer problem that I'm excited to share with you. Two other additional really exciting things, or very interesting things that came up in our conversation, is that he said if he made a game that even made $500,000, it would not be enough for him to quit his job. And so it was interesting to dive into his motivations if making enough money like that to make more games is not at the core of why he's doing it. Because that's what's true for me and a lot of others. And then lastly, he has a really interesting system of balancing in this game, Flawed Tactics. It's sort of like a stock market or marketplace where if players are repeatedly using the same troops, they go up. If no one's using it, it goes down. And so it's a really kind of self-adjusting meta, which was really interesting to talk about. So before I share this episode, I do want to let you know that we now have a Dev Dream newsletter. So if for future episodes you want to get show notes, behind the scenes looks, and a couple of extra takes from me, you can find the link to that in the description. Really excited to share. Let's get to the conversation.
Still getting used to it, honestly. So, Charlie, I think thanks for coming on. I'm excited to interview you because you're slightly different than some of the other devs that we've had on in that you're 46, you've got a wife and kids and a full-time day job, and then you continue to make games. So I'm just curious, what is it that motivates you to keep making games and fitting that into your busy life?
Well, thanks for having me, Blake. I think at this point I can't imagine my life without making games. Certainly at the start, and I'd say it really started 10 or 11 years ago when my oldest was born. And I think that's right around the time that Indie Game the movie kind of came out. And that was a big inspiration. That's why I'm so excited about your conversation with Edmund coming up. He's a legend and somebody definitely to ask. I can't imagine my days not making games, and I think every waking hour that's not family or work oriented is games. So if I'm on a long drive, if I'm on anything, I'm always listening to some sort of podcast. I think it's just the absolute mental challenge of trying to understand how all the different parts fit together. And I think programming goes a lot with that too. You're kind of creating puzzles that you have to solve as you go. So there's just really nothing else like it. There's definitely motivational, or I'm sorry, monetary, kind of incentives for a while. I think I've come back to reality over the years, and it would certainly be nice to make significant amount of money on it at some point in time, but I'm definitely in the camp now that even if I don't have monetary success, I will still keep on making games in some sort of capacity. It is hard to justify the massive amount of time and mental energy that you dedicate to it without any sort of monetary reward. But if I wasn't doing it, I don't know what I would do with all that mental energy anyway. So there really doesn't seem like there's a choice at this point.
Yeah, you said you watched Indie Game or the documentary. Was that a kind of starting point for you, or did you have any relationship with game dev before that? Because at that point, if my math is mathing, you were like 35, 36, so it's slightly later in life.
Yeah, I think when I was around 31 or 32, I was working in a remote location in Bermuda, beautiful island, and I wanted to do game dev. I started getting interested then, but I couldn't figure out how to actually get about it. And I can't remember what the platform was, like XNA or XLR or something like that. There was something out there that you could do it, but it was far too complicated. Um, when I revisited in 2015 or 2016, somehow I stumbled on Unity, and then things started kind of seeming possible. There was tutorials online, and it seemed like, okay, well, this is definitely going to be difficult, but there is a path towards making a game. Whereas a few years before that, there didn't seem like there was a path, and it seemed like game dev was just kind of this magical thing that you needed to go to school for and grow up for, and just kind of have over time. So something about, I think, Unity really triggered making it, okay, this seems like it's actually possible.
Yeah, something that I've learned about myself over the past couple years is just that I'm happiest when I'm creating, kind of like what you were talking about of like what to do with that mental energy. And so did you have that kind of drive in your 20s and then game dev kind of eventually filled the gap, or was it kind of a realization you had, in your 30s?
Yeah, no. So I've been kind of a corporate slave or corporate drone for for most of my life, and I think there's been some really good things that have come out of that for sure. Um, but a lot of my 20s were spent taking actuarial exams. I'm guessing not much of the audience knows what actuary is. It's long story short, it's a finance dude for an insurance company, but you have to take just an absolute shit ton of exams, and they're extraordinarily difficult. So a lot of the actuaries you meet have spent their 20s just studying for exams nonstop. And then once that process was kind of done, all of a sudden you have this glut of time where there's, nothing kind of looming over. And that's quickly filled with other things, family and so on. But there was this space, this mental space, especially, to kind of challenge yourself. And that's where game dev, eventually fit in. I think it was also, it definitely coincided with the birth of my son. And I think a lot of times you'll start taking a step back and you'll say, what do I want my life path to kind of look like? Uh, and I love my job that I have and I love my career, but if I could choose any sort of path in the future, then game dev absolutely has to be part of it. I'm not sure actuarial career has to be a part of it, even though I enjoy what I'm doing. I'm very, blessed to have what I have. Uh, Game dev has to be in that path kind of going forward. So, and I think in around 2015, 2016, when I started, thinking like, hey, we only have this one life to live. So I guess it's maybe like kind of early midlife crisis. So we only have this one life to live. Let's do something that you really have a passion for, or really want to. And I'm so thankful that I did.
What kind of sacrifices do you have to make to keep game dev a part of your life whenever it could be easy to just, you have plenty of things keeping your time busy? How do you actually do that?
Yeah, it's mostly sleep. So to be frank, most mornings I would say, starts at 4 a.m. And kind of grinding it out. Maybe helping with the kids in the morning. My wife, takes care of most of that, so I'm very blessed to have that. But really kind of grinding it out till 8 or 9 a.m. when I kind of start the day job. And then to the extent that there's free time during the day or free time at night, then taking that up. Now, the kids have tons of activities, so that's usually pretty difficult. But I think I'm at this point now where the programming, the coding comes very easily. The art and sound I have no capacity for anyway, so I have to pay for that. So it's really the game design that is the most mentally taxing. And it's, in my opinion, is by far the hardest of all the disciplines. And I think everybody thinks they're a good game designer. I think very few people actually are good game designers. I'm probably in that camp that's not a good game designer, but I think it's incredibly difficult. And it's kind of that like, I don't know, what is that Laffer curve or something like that, where when you start off, you think how easy it is, and then you
Mm-hmm.
quickly get hit by reality,
Yep.
and you might say, "My gosh, this is much more difficult." But the reason why it kind of works out is because a lot of the game design I think can be done without dedicated time at the computer. It's a lot of times it's
Mm.
thinking, it's car
Yep.
rides, um, and I hate being on my phone around my kids. I'm on it far more than I'd like to admit. But AI has turned into something that's just an absolute blessing for game design. It's that extraordinarily smart rubber ducky that you can keep on bouncing ideas off of and so on. And so in some ways it's actually made game design feel more reachable because you have that constant feedback. There's nobody on the other end that gets sick of hearing your ideas or sick of saying, well, what if we do this or what if we do that? Granted, it's overly positive and it'll definitely
Right.
pump you up for a little bit, but
You got to wade through it, but
yeah, exactly.
sure. Yeah. Well, I do have some specific design questions coming up for your current game, Flawed Tactics, that you're working on. But I have just a couple questions to kind of build the lore for the audience, of Charlie. So, what other games have you released, either commercially or small games, or is this you've been doing development for a while? What's your backlog look like?
Yeah, so I've never released a commercial game. This will be my first commercial game. After 11 years or so, I can't count the number of prototypes, but I don't think anything was ever of the quality of saying, "Hey, I should release it." Um, if I was starting off today with the kind of advice that you get today, as far as release small games, I think it would have been different. I think quite a few of those kind of prototypes may have made it to that stage. Um, but when you're starting out, kind of the 2015 to 2020, you're not really seeing those small games. You're seeing things that need to be much more elevated, I would say. Um, and so it never felt good enough until Flawed Tactics about Dome really started 3 years ago, and I was by that point very comfortable with netcode, much further in my game design, and really ready to just dedicate a lot of time to a particular project. So I would definitely say, and I'm sure we'll get into it later, but Flawed Tactics I think is not your typical first release type game. I think the bar is much higher on this than I think your average next best game. I mean, that's not saying much. I think the average next best game is probably not the highest bit of quality anyway. But I think that I wish I had released some of those games in retrospect, but I'm also happy that I think the bar is going to be set pretty high.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense that your first game can come out with a big swing. You were mentioning kind of the advice you can get today, and something that you dropped that we could potentially talk about as we were going back and forth to set this up was the accessibility of game dev icons. I was just curious what you meant by that.
Yeah, I mean, you probably know it better than I do firsthand. Over the years, I've reached out to a number of people like Rami Ishmael, Raynad, who created the Bazaar. They're surprisingly easy to get a hold of. They'll chat with you. They'll hop on a Discord call with you. And I guess, your average guy walking along the street probably doesn't know those names, but from a game dev perspective, like these guys are kind of like legends, and they have so much value to offer, and that they're so willing to kind of just talk with essentially a nobody in the space. It's really comforting. If I was to go to my regular job, regular career, and try to call up the CEO of an insurance company, I don't think they would take my call. You couldn't go buy them lunch or so on. So, but I think you're kind of probably a good representation of that too. You've had insane names on there. I mean, it's crazy the amount of people and the nice long form conversations that they spend with you. And I think it just goes to the game dev community seems to be very receptive if they can tell that you're actually serious about it, and that this isn't something like, okay, in 2 weeks I'm going to be onto some other sort of passion. And it's just really nice to know that people are so accessible and willing to chat.
Yeah, game dev lives in a really unique space, I think, because like in the grand scheme of things, these are like D-list celebrities we're talking about. Like they don't have paparazzi. 1 out of 100 people maybe knows them, but in the game dev community, they're like really revered and respected. And it's like, yeah, and like you said, there's something about the game dev community where, yeah, like you said, if they can tell you're serious and you're putting work into it, they actually want to help you. Like I was lucky enough to interview Jonas Tyroller, was probably like
Yeah.
a huge highlight for me. But it was interesting. I was talking to another developer, and before they were even very well known, Jonas jumped on a Discord call and like gave them some advice on like what people would think. And it's like Jonas doesn't have to do that. He's plenty popular enough. He has plenty of success. He can just do his YouTube channel, make games, and that be it. But yeah, it's kind of amazing. It's a special pocket and it's a special thing, and it's part of the reason this podcast can even exist. But yeah, that's very cool. So you've gotten to talk to a couple, and they've chatted with you, like a couple very notable people.
Yeah, definitely. And I also feel comfortable that I could reach out again, and they'd probably play a demo, or they'd probably give some advice. I mean, you have to catch them at the right time. Clearly, they're busy individuals, but
Yeah.
I mean, you're just kind of throw out some names. If I was to put out a top 3 of folks I'd love to talk to, it would be Jonas. You've already had Edmund. You're going to have, and then either one of the Slay the Spire developers. And I have a friend that has been able to reach out and chat with one of the Slay the Spire developers too. I mean, these guys are they're just normal people that are just happen to be brilliant and really accessible. And I don't know, it's really fun to see that it's not kind of like this super ego driven type industry. So
Yeah, it's a really, really special part of the community. I'm glad we got to touch on that for a minute and just, yeah, say how awesome it is. Jumping back a little bit ago, you talked about finances and kind of how you were thinking about, you maybe early on had that dream of making a bunch of money and making full-time games, but now you've kind of just put that aside and that's not a part of it. And you said something to me pretty crazy, as I mentioned our back and forth of just setting up the interview. And you said, even if you made a game that made like $500,000, it wouldn't be enough to go full-time. So just for you and your mindset, I'm curious now how you're defining success, because I think a lot of people, when I ask people at the end of the podcast what their dreams are, most people, unless they're already there, their dream is just to make enough money to make their games full time. So for you, what does success look like, and what are you kind of building towards here?
I think I would have historically defined success as purely financial, and I think it's a much deeper answer now. But I guess to kind of go back to that comment of the 500,000, and I think it was you interviewing Marnix just recently. I just saw the video, and he was kind of talking about. And I think Marnix has definitely had some success, and it looks like they're going to have more success with MMO 98. But I think he's recently married, and he's kind of really starting to go on to the next steps of his life. It's really expensive. I mean, especially living in America, we don't really have access to healthcare unless, essentially we have a job and there's really no backstops. And $500,000 is an absolute ton of money, clearly. But when you start doing the math of it and you start taking the Steam cut out and then you're down to 350, and then you start taking taxes out and you start taking out any sort of retirement, any sort of health insurance. And if you're trying to support, a family of 5, if you can make that every year, then absolutely, or even every 2 years, absolutely. But I certainly don't have enough faith in myself to say, oh, I can make a $500,000 game every year, every 2 years. And so even if, Flawed Tactics does well and pulls in $500,000, it's not enough to say, okay, hey, let's just move forward with this. Still need to keep the day job. Although I'm kind of reminded there's this, I think this GDC talk with the developer who made the first tree, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
He had mentioned that when he was developing that, he had a full-time job and he would work at nights on it. And then, he made tons of money and quit his day job and was working full-time on game dev. And his comment was, I'm not actually really spending any more time on it. I just have more free time elsewhere. And I think that's true. So again, I really like my job, but it takes a different amount of mental energy to do my day job than it does to do game dev. I don't know that I would have the capacity to double my amount of mental energy for game dev anyway, because it's so difficult. It's so mentally taxing in a good way, but it's so draining that, if I can work on it 4 hours, on a good day today, even if I, was independently wealthy, that doesn't mean I have 9 hours of mental energy in me to do it. So because that, I'm not sure that it's necessarily worth removing the backstop and kind of like the, quote unquote financial security that my family has, unless there's a bona fide hit. I mean, clearly if you're making millions of dollars, if you're developing Balacho or something like that, then you're in a totally different world. But I think those pipe dreams are long gone, and maybe in the future will be, pleasantly surprised. But I guess to go back to your question of kind of how to define success, the bar keeps getting lower and lower for me, I think. I think if I was to talk about a non-monetary success, it would be amazing one day to walk on a plane and have somebody with an iPad or an iPhone or something like that just playing your game. That'd be such a cool feeling to say, oh my gosh, this person, I have no idea who they are and they're enjoying their time. Watch this. I think that would be an amazing experience. For now, I mean, from a financial perspective, if I could fund, one of my kids' college over the years of making game dev, then or making games with game dev, I think that would be a financial success too. So something that I can say, hey, because of this work and this passion that I put into something, here's the ability to kind of do X, Y, or Z. I think that's nice. Clearly, that's different than being just a full-time game dev. I think in the short-term success, as far as this year with Flawed Tactics, I think I'd like to see 100 concurrent players. I think that'd be a nice big milestone. I don't think that leads to Ferraris by any stretch of the imagination, and may not even lead to, making back the financial investment on it. But it'd be really nice just to see players enjoying it, or be able to go on Twitch and see random streamers that you didn't reach out to say, hey, please play this game, who are just naturally playing the game because it's the genre they like to play and their audience are enjoying it. I think that'd be just absolutely amazing experience. So to be able to share your kind of thing that you poured all your passion into for so many years and see other people enjoying it.
Yeah, well, I do think there's something about this mindset you're taking that really, I think everyone that's interested in game dev has at some point. Like, I love the kind of biz dev stuff. And so that's why I talk about it a lot on the podcast. And I'm always asking people what they're doing for marketing and things like this, because I find it interesting. And, if I think about what I want to do with game dev, I want to do it well. But I think that piece that you're talking about of like someone playing your game and enjoying it, I think that is probably for most people at least a part of the origin story of like, what if I could make something and watch people play it? Like, it's a quintessential part of game dev, I think. Like, it's even for the most biz dev people, there's still a lot of enjoyment from seeing someone enjoy the thing you made. So I think that's a really important part. And I love that you have this sort of very balanced approach to it, and that, hey, I'm probably not going to make enough to quit my day job. That would be extremely, extremely rare, but I like it enough anyway, just to be on the journey, to be sharing my ideas. And that's really cool. So
it wasn't always that way, though. It's been a path down. I would say it really hit home, I think, 2 years ago when I first released a playtest for Flawed Tactics. It seems crazy that it was 2 years ago. And it seemed that long ago. And I think I had the naive view that people would find the game by themselves naturally, that people would play and they would recommend their friends to play and so on. And that didn't happen. And I don't think it necessarily can happen unless you have an extraordinary talent that I don't necessarily have, or just, you're really able to do all the things that I should be doing, the marketing and so on, that I haven't, necessarily been good at. But I think that's when, and, I think it causes, I'm not sure I'd go as far as to say it causes depression but it mentally is a struggle to see something that you put so much time into and it not go the way you're going, or not go the path that you're hoping it would go. But I also think that's probably just part of growing and releasing creative things, that you may need to accept that kind of disappointment and then start asking yourself, is the craft worth that disappointment? And so over the last couple of years, the game has gotten much better. The reception's gotten much better. People are playing it for much longer. People are recommending it and so on. And it feels better, but no longer is that kind of naive view of like, oh, this thing's just going to blow up. Now it's a more realistic view of this very likely will not blow up. I think there's a chance, but it very likely won't. But at least for people who enjoy this particular genre and this, I think I'm going to, give them some enjoyment, give them something they haven't necessarily seen before. So it's exciting. It definitely goes back to the more artistic side instead of the financial side.
Yeah. I think something I have come to grips with in that, so this podcast is like my project, like since discovering that I need to create something. Like I'm just a person that I've done YouTube channels, I've done blogs, I've tried a lot of different things. But as I've gotten, a little bit older, I've come to grips with like a piece of it for me is that there's like a light at the end of the tunnel that I might escape the 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And with the YouTube channel, it's like that's there. But I've also at the same time kind of come to this place of like, I just need the light to be out there. Even if it's like a 1 in a million chance, my work creatively, like it doesn't need to be attainable. It doesn't need to happen a year from now. It's just like something about that, like just what if makes me a little bit happier. And it's just because, the 9 to 5, I actually luckily have a really good job now, but I've had times where if you have a really rough job and you don't have anything on the horizons, life is kind of hellish. So I resonate kind of with what you're saying of this like mindset shift, in that I wanted that kind of thing to be out there, but then I did come to this place of like, even if it doesn't happen, I'm enjoying the journey. It's very Brandon Sanderson, journey before destination. Yeah. If you've read it. Yeah. Anyway, I just resonated with what you're saying.
Well, I think I listen to probably similar to you. I consume just about every game dev content that I can. And I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. I think you have a true talent for questions. I think it's kind of ridiculous you have me on along with actual real names that have done successful things in the game dev industry. But obviously I know very little about YouTube or the path of podcasters and so on. But your questions and your dialogue are so fantastic that I can't think of any other long form podcast that I will listen from start to end at the percentage that I listen to yours. Almost all of them I'll listen from start to end. So you're really fantastic at that. And then I'm the same way, that I need that hope. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of those smaller projects over the years never came to fruition. Some were just truly terrible ideas. And some of them I look back on, I go to my friends, they're like, why didn't you guys tell me how bad of an idea this was? Because when you start getting into that groove, you think, this is a great game. And you look at it later, it's like, what were you thinking? This is just a horribly bad idea. But I do need that hope also. So even with Flawed Tactics, we're getting closer to release, and I've started working on a side project. And I think part of that is to reduce the stress or reduce the fear of Flawed Tactics not doing the way I want it to do. Because as soon as you accept that reality fully, probably be a next fest in June and so on, and then, the reality really kind of hits the road. As soon as that happens, I think that'll be a difficult mental place to be in if there's not another hope. And so I think it's nice to have a smaller side project that you're also excited about, because then if things don't go well, then you're just like, okay, well, there's still this other thing that I got to keep on looking forward to. So you mentioned a lot of different projects and so on, but I totally agree that I just need that hope of success, financial success, or I don't know how to define it anymore, but going forward. And so, yeah, it's such a roller coaster, but I think as long as I have that light at the end of the tunnel, and the other thing is, I think I don't know of anything for me personally that there is that has a higher percentage of generational wealth than game dev. Percentage may be very, very small. Certainly better than buying a lottery ticket for me. I have no chance of making music. I have no chance of writing the next great book.
Yeah.
But as far as, kind of that financial dream of breaking away from everything and, kind of being independently wealthy, I think game dev at least still offers that possibility. The vast majority of us will not reach that, but it is nice to know that, hey, there is potential. There are the vampire survivors out there. I do think those people are truly, truly talented that are able to create that. And I question whether I have that talent for sure, but I'm also not ready to give up on it until keep on giving it a shot.
Well, first off, thank you so much for your kind words about the podcast. That really fills me with joy. One idea that made me think of that I think people can relate to their game dev journey is that, yeah, similar to you, I, even before starting the podcast, listened to a bunch of game dev podcasts, but all the ones I listened to were by already at least somewhat successful developers. Like I listened to Jonas's podcast, I listened to Thomas Brush, I listened to Aramis with Scope Creepers. But all of those people were making games and had released games. And I felt like there was this space for someone that hasn't done it and doesn't know anything to just ask questions and then listen. Because all of those guests have a valuable experience to also put in. And so it's like my superpower is actually that I haven't made a game, because then I can just take it all in and be actually more like the other audience members. And I hope that comes through. That's always been my goal. So, but yeah, thank you so much for the kind words. I really appreciate it and feel very happy about that.
I think it does come. I was thinking, like, if I was to start a podcast, there would always probably be me sort of bending it towards my own personal goals, and I'll listen to Thomas Brush and stuff like that. But I think a lot of times the conversations kind of go towards what he wants to push or what his personal experience is with it, and kind of, directing the conversation that way. And I don't feel that with you. And I kind of, it's interesting watching Aramis and them having success. And I think that's a really fantastic story, because they are really going from nothing to something. And I agree that a lot of the other ones, there's already something there, and then they don't understand why it's so difficult to market or why it's so difficult to get the first 100 reviews or something like that. It's like, well, you already have an established audience, and you had talent to get there and did a lot of work to get there, but you're in a different frame of mind now than a lot of the other new game devs. And then you look at the Aramis and so on, and you can kind of see them take that full journey. And I mean, from the term influencer, I can't imagine there's many bigger influencers right now than Aramis and Authority. I mean, they're going to basically blow up the whole node buster genre and so on. So they influence the game dev, they influence Next Fest, they influence because of their success.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch. Yeah, right time, right place, right genre. I mean, and they made a good, fun game. And so it's like the culmination of a lot of things is really cool to watch for them. I've actually been re-listening to the old Scope Creepers podcast, and it's fun to like hear Aramis's thoughts like pre-Black Hole game. And yeah, so that's been fun. That's the other cool thing about podcasts, is that you get this kind of history of like, actually, he's been consistent. He said this stuff before he actually made one, or now, maybe he's changed his mind on things. So anyway, small tangent. I think, yeah, it's been super fun getting to know you, but now I do want to dive in and switch gears and talk about your game a little bit. So you're working on Flawed Tactics. Why don't you just give me / the audience, like, what's the elevator pitch of Flawed Tactics? Like, what is it?
So it's a PvP autobattler. So it's an online PvP autobattler. Normally, I would have said it's an online async PvP autobattler, but I've recently added a live mode also. So I'm working on the rebranding of it. I think the audience who's familiar with Teamfight Tactics will kind of understand the interaction as far as the hexagonal grid, you place minions and so on. And then the audience that are familiar with, the backpack battles or the super auto pets or the bazaar, for the async nature, where you are playing against other players, but you're playing against the ghost of other players. So it helps with a lot of the concerns with multiplayer, because maybe kind of taking a step back, I think most devs, when they start out at least, will say multiplayer is very difficult because of the technical side. And they're right. The technical side is far more complicated than the single player. But once you have the technical side down, probably the next biggest hurdle is, wow, now I need more than one person to play this game in order for them to have an engaging experience. And I would argue that that is significantly more difficult than the technical side. So async PvP helps solve that, because when I'm playing my game and I submit my team for round 7, that goes into a database, and then somebody else, when they're playing their game with round 7, will face my team. But the nice part is we don't have to be online at the same time, so it reduces the need for having a large player base, because essentially there's an opponent that's always available. There's no queue times and so on. I can definitely go into some of the design decisions why that may have actually been a bad idea for my game for Flawed Tactics, but from the elevator pitch, think TFT, but with async PvP. And even that's not a full description. I know you mentioned one podcast you like Magic the Gathering.
Big fan.
So let me ask you, what is your favorite thing? I don't know. So this is a loaded question because I don't know what your answer is going to be, but what is your favorite thing about Magic the Gathering? Like, which part of it?
Man, I don't. It's tough to name one thing. I'm a big Commander player. Is probably my favorite format. For anyone that doesn't play Magic, Magic is usually a 2-player game where you play 1-on-1. But in this version called Commander, it's multiplayer. You play 4-player, and so Commander is my favorite format. But it's hard to identify one thing with Magic that's fun. Part of the fun is, I guess, if based on the question, if I had to say one thing, my favorite part is actually building the deck.
Exactly. So whew.
The creativity. Yeah. Is that where you wanted me to go?
Yes, thank you. All right. I messaged you in Discord saying.
Yes.
So I'm an old guy, and I started playing Magic, gosh, when it was right when the Dark was going out of print. So I think it was revised and so on. And I played for a number of years, and I haven't touched it in decades. Unfortunately, maybe I should get back into it. But I remember, I was a kid, and just cards spread all over my room, all over the house, and taking, mana cards and writing on them, and, making proxies, because all I wanted to do is keep on thinking about different decks and constructing different decks. Yep. And that to me was the most fun. You stay up late at night, it was like theory crafting. What could a deck kind of be? I think, and I could be wrong because I'm not an active Magic player by any stretch of the imagination, but I did play Hearthstone for a long time also, and it's the same thing. I love the Hearthstone, the construction. But net decking has taken away that fun for me. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not interested in going and playing Magic, because now there is a quote unquote optimal deck, and I can write a check and I can get that deck, and then I can go execute on that deck. And there's still some skill in executing and so on. And perhaps the meta shifts and I have to I don't know. That to me is not interesting, because the interesting part was the construction part. So with Flawed Tactics, it is different than a traditional deck building game where you don't know what you're going to get and you start the game and you keep on constructing your deck as you go. That's what Teamfight Tactics is. That's what Hearthstone Battlegrounds is, for example. Mine is more constructed. You choose your minions and you choose your spells to start, and then that is your pool that you move forward with. However, that seems like it's just ripe for problems with net decking, because, hey, there's going to be an optimal play for this type of thing, and that's exactly what I don't want. So the most innovative thing I would say about Flawed Tactics is that it is a market balancing system. So let's say to play a cactus card, it costs 5 gold. And I think that's really good. That cactus is really strong. So I'm going to put it in my deck. And then when I play it, it only takes 5 gold. So great, I'll play a lot of cactus. What's actually happening in the back end is that cactus is going up and up in price. And the more other players are playing that cactus, the more it goes up in price. So it'll go to 6 and 7. And if it gets up to 8, it's no longer worth it. I need to remove cactus from my deck, and I need to choose something else. So what happens is this market balancing system is essentially an anti-net decking system, because the meta is constantly shifting. So I even have little stock tickers and so on, and see little graphs and seeing how things kind of move up and down. Because what I want people to say is, I don't know what the optimal thing is, because I have to look at what the market is. If cactuses are 8 and angels are 2, then I'm going to go with angels because they're relatively more powerful. It also opens up the design space from a developer standpoint that I can make a super overpowered card. I don't have to worry about the balance of it. I can make some dragon that's 3 times more powerful than everything else, because put it at the base price going in, and then the market adjusts it. Players recognize how powerful it is. They keep on buying it, keep on buying it. There's one spell in there, for example, the average cost of a spell is fixed at 8. So when a new spell goes in, it costs 8. One spell is up to 22 right now because it steals an opponent's minion and all the things that goes with it. And another spell, it's called Strength, where it buffs their things. Now, if I was to set the price for that, I would have set it at like 4. I didn't think it was very good. And then players kept playing it, and I think it's up to 12 now, and they're right. Like, it is really good. I just didn't see the power in it and how they're using it. So the nice part from a development standpoint is that I don't have to worry about the balance of things. The players and the market dictate what that is. The other thing, and I don't think I have a big enough player base right now for people to say, this card is bullshit, it's too powerful, or it's too weak. Well, then don't play it, or do play it if it's too powerful, because what you've done is you recognize the dislocation in the market, and that really becomes a skill expression of the game, is what is overpowered or underpowered relative to its cost, not just to the actual card itself. One other note is sometimes spells and minions can go negative. So it brings into different things. I can also design intentionally bad or harmful cards, where cards, when you play them, they actually hurt you as a player somehow, because that just like overpowered cards. Maybe it costs -3 now. Okay, is it now worth the resource generation in order to hurt yourself because you want those resources? And so, in my opinion, that brings net decking. It takes away net decking and brings construction back into video games.
Yeah, I definitely see the vision with what you're going for. Like, one, you have a stock ticker. I'm just a huge nerd for like
Yeah.
any kind of like number go up, number go down. Like, that sounds really fun. And when you relate it to this magic, kind of that correlation, I am the person that I want to find the card, like in real life, that costs 7 cents that nobody's heard of,
Yeah.
but in my little synergy is like awesome. And then people are like, what is that? I've never heard of that. And so I can imagine that similar feeling with your game of like, I'm going to look through all the cards. I'm going to find the one that cost 1 that's the most advantageous. I'm going to play it, and people are going to be shocked with how good it is. So I can definitely see like, there's some things here that are really unique and could potentially be really well liked, but it is a bit risky because it's a pretty big differentiation from what people maybe expect with the genre. Do you have any worry that part of maybe what's fun for people, or at least what they're expecting, is the sort of every round battling for the same pool of units? Like, are you at all worried about that?
So, to anybody that I've ever explained the market idea to, it's been almost universal, like, which is the only idea I've ever had that seems to be people like it. However, what I've realized is that the world may have moved on from constructed gameplay and moved on to deck building. And deck building is such an incredibly strong loop, because that one more play, we just dynamically try again, not knowing what you're going to get. It's so good. And the other async PvP games that have had success, I would consider deck building genres. So the backpack battles, I would consider a deck builder, the Bazaar, Super Auto Pets, because you don't know what you're going to get. You just have to navigate around that. I thought with making Flawed Tactics a async PvP but constructed, it would be okay. The PvP nature of async isn't strong enough or isn't compelling enough for players to continue playing, because they don't get that feeling of, I defeated somebody else. It really feels more like a PvE game. And constructed PvE is interesting, but it's not as compelling as deck building in that nature. So that is my biggest concern, and that's why I've added live PvP into it. So if you imagine the live, I'm not sure if you can imagine Teamfight Tactics, but you still have it's the same game. You have an 8x8 grid. I have minions, you have minions. When I purchase one, you see me purchase one. When you evolve one, I see it evolve. When I play a spell on one of my guys or one of your guys, you see all that happen. And it's eventually the store phase ends, and then you go into a battle phase, auto battle, somebody loses, you go back to the store phase. So the loop is the same, but I'm now feeling much more like I'm facing somebody else. So now I'm back into constructed PvP, which I do think is a strong loop, and that's the Magic the Gathering. That's the original Hearthstone, where you actually feel like you're playing against another player. The problem is now you're running into, you need other players. The whole thing I was trying to avoid from the start,
Yeah.
that's solved with async PvP. The good news is that in my game, you can play the async mode, queue up for live, and continue playing async. And then when the live pops, it'll suck you into the live game. When the live game's over, you just return to your async and you just continue on, because there's no turn time, there's no turn pressure, stuff like that. My hope is that will help, but it's a true design problem that I didn't see until I got too far in, that I think the world has moved on from constructed, and I'm not sure that async PvP constructed is a compelling enough game loop to base everything on. So we'll see. It is still fun, but I don't think it's fun enough. So I'll get players playing, they play it for 3 or 4 days, but then that's it. You know, they don't pick it up again unless there's new cards coming out. And really the goal was to have something that people want to play over and over again. And I think the live mode has that potential. But again, you need an active player base in order to even have that kind of work. And that's the hardest part about multiplayer.
Yeah, you've definitely set yourself up with a big challenge in getting a big enough player base. But I will say, I see the vision with it though. If you can get a big enough player base, I'm actually kind of like the perfect potential customer for your game, because I'm a super casual teamfight tactics player.
Okay.
Like once a year, I'll download it and play it for 2 weeks, and then my brain hurts because there's so much going on in a teamfight tactics game, and I find it kind of hard to do the mental load when I don't understand the full meta. I don't know all the intricacies. And a piece of the game, I know that if I want to maximize, I need to also be like tracking probably like the top 4 players in my individual game, every game, and what they're building, and then try to counter shift.
Yeah.
And then knowing are those pieces good enough that if we fight for them, I can still win, or do I need to completely abandon my plan? So with this, though, you take off some of that mental load because your deck is set. And so I definitely see that there's like the potential for it to be really well liked. It also, like you said, it could go the other way, and they just don't want to do constructed. So I don't know. It's always fun to like have a novel idea, like you're making something that's actually a little bit unique. You're putting a flair on it. So I'm super curious to see where it goes. I'll probably be a customer. Because I really like the idea of it.
Well, it'd be
You dropped a
interesting.
couple.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
It'll be interesting to see how well the live PvP does, because, and I'm sure somebody will correct me, I don't think there is a live PvP constructed that doesn't suffer from net decking. Because usually it's going to be, I'm going to play this meta, it's going to be a paper, rock, scissors. Like, depending on what you chose versus what I chose, the path is almost predetermined. Now instead it's, you looked at the market and I looked at the market. We both constructed a deck based on that. Who read the market better and who's going to be able to go against each other. So the other thing it allows to do, and my monetization is still not set in stone, but it allows me to add new cards, new spells, new minions, without necessarily having it be pay to win. So I think some things you'll say, the Bazaar is a brilliant game, but I think when they come out with a new hero, there's always claims that, okay, you have to purchase this hero. And then just like, with Hearthstone, the latest pack is usually some sort of strength increase, because there's incentive to buy it. And then eventually it gets nerfed, but there's some period of time usually that something is kind of overtuned. For example, with mine, the way the market balancing works is that should be minimal. It will still happen to a certain degree. We can go into all the nerdy details of that, of why it will still be a small effect. But in general, I think that part is also avoided. So you can introduce new content, and even if everybody doesn't have access to that particular content, that does not mean that new content will be overpowered, because the market will adjust in certain ways for that. So.
Yeah, let's say the game does really well and you're able to maintain 200 concurrent players like consistently. What would your approach be in supporting the game? Would you try to do paid DLC? Do you want to just keep it exciting for current players? How would you approach it? Have you thought about it?
Yeah, I've thought about it a lot. I see backpack battles, and I think that's a great path to success, where they're essentially just a premium game, and they blew up because it's a fantastic game, and they don't need to do DLCs. Now, for mine, I need a player base more than Backpack Battles does, because Backpack Battles is pure async. I think the live portion will be better than the async portion. I think that has a greater chance of success. I think the async portion supports the live portion because it gives you something to do while you're waiting in the queue, and you can still have engaging fun time and leaderboards and all that kind of stuff. But if I need player base, that all leads to free to play. So you need the most players as possible. It's cross-platform, so if I'm playing on Steam and I load up on my iPhone, it'll boot me off of Steam and load up on the iPhone, and you can continue the game and so on. But if I'm looking for mobile to be there also, then again, that's more free to play. So the most likely path is either very inexpensive base game or free to play base game, and then inexpensive expansion packs. I mean, as long as there's some sort of financial reason to keep on doing it, or even if there's not a financial reason, as long as some players are enjoying it, it doesn't take a whole lot to add new content. I need to pay some artists for things. Really, the tough thing is trying to design new interesting things that add to the game, and it's not just another combat unit. It's interacting in some economy way or something that hasn't been seen before, and adds a new dynamic or an element for people to say, oh, these synergies will kind of work in this particular way. So I think a lot of it just depends on kind of how, the demo release goes, next best release goes, and then just make them from there. That, I guess the good news personally is that if the game makes zero money, that sucks, but that's okay. So I would rather, at this point, I would choose to have players more than money if I had to choose between the two. And so that could probably just be the free to play route.
Yeah, can you talk me through any thoughts that you mentioned demo and Next Fest. I know there's a lot of like advice out there on what's the best marketing kind of workflow. Can you tell me just about how you're planning to share the game? Do you have anything you're particularly thinking about?
So I'm aiming for the June Next Fest. There's still lots to do. My wish lists are terrible. I think it's like 500 or something like that. I haven't done any marketing. I followed the game advice that I think has now been changed, was get your Steam page up as early as possible. And I think there's a lot of support right now that actually when your Steam page goes live, initially you do get some sort of exposure boost. And I think when I released it, there's no trailer. My current trailer is terrible, but by the time this is published, hopefully the trailer will be nice. My current Steam page is terrible. Hopefully by the time this is released, the Steam page will be of quality. So there's a whole lot of things that I haven't done that I need to do. And who was it? I think I just re-listened to your conversation with Thorny, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, and he made a point that just hit home really hard. It was you have these developers that are spending hundreds or thousands of hours on their game, and they spend like 10 hours on the Steam page or less. And that's me to a T. Like, so I have nobody to blame but myself, I think, for not having a significant wish list. I do have a few hundred waiting for the open playtest also. There's some playtests going on already, but I'm waiting to open it up until a couple more steps. But the development plan, if things go well, is June Next Fest. And then I need to try to decide the timing for the demo before that. I think most guidance is leaning towards a hard marketing push right around the demo release, which is fairly close to the Next Fest release. So I think there's one lever that doesn't get talked about a whole lot in game dev podcasts, which is the playtest. So we always talk about like, how can we interact with our audience? And I think when you release your demo, you get an option to say, hey, email everybody that's wishlisted that game. Playtests also get emails. So when somebody gets open to a playtest, they also get. So my thought is, I have enough playtesters right now to be testing the technical sides of the game. So I'm not terribly worried about that. But I think maybe a week or two before I release the demo is when I'll also release the playtest, and I'll make sure the playtest is configured such that hopefully I have fairly high retention with those playtesters to cut off the playtest and say, please go play the demo instead. Then they re-download the demo, and now all of a sudden you have some momentum in your demo. Maybe that'll activate the Steam algorithm, maybe it won't. But I think it's going to be a playtest fully open, followed and then closed immediately. So only the few hundred that are waiting for that playtest will get access. Then you close it immediately. You start advertising for the demo, hit the demo, and then a couple weeks later, you release into Next Fest. And I mean, by that time, the game is kind of done anyway, at least for release stage. So I think release, whether that's early access or whether that's full release, within a month after that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. Yeah, like you said, I haven't heard many people talk about this playtest idea, and this is it's at least a sound idea to do the playtest and then jump that to kind of kickstart your demo, because there is some buzz that like concurrent players in your demo can do more things in Steam as well. So yeah, that's a good thing to think about. I'll be curious. I'll be following along to see if that does anything for you, and maybe we'll even have a follow-up conversation afterwards. or something. Yeah, that's very cool. Where did my, oh man, I had a question in the middle of that. Where did it go? How are you handling the demo in terms of how much content players can get? Is the PvP live? What's your demo actually look like compared to the game?
So that's going to go to the monetization strategy. Most likely what it will be is somewhere between 16 and 20 characters and 16 and 20 spells available for the demo. And then for the release, it will be a handful more of the rest. So I think I think Backpack Battles had a lot of success because their demo was such a good representation of their actual game. And their demo, people just kept on playing over and over again. Now, again, that kind of goes into the deck building nature, which I don't have. So I need the live part, I think, to keep people coming back over and over again. But I don't imagine the demo and full game will be terribly different other than some more options. And I think I'm okay with that because I think I would rather have less money and higher review score than more money and lower. So, and I know Steam players are, who knows what you're going to get, but it's one of those cases. I think if you can make the demo a really good representation of the game, and the regular game is just a little bit better, then really the only people that are going to be buying the game are the people who really like it. And then hopefully your review scores stay high. And frankly, if I can get a high enough player base to play the demo and to keep on playing the demo because the demo will just, stay live, then I don't think there's a whole lot of chance for a lot of financial success anyway. So maybe there would be a quick grab of money or so on, but that's not as interesting to me as I think making just a really highly regarded game.
Yeah. Will the demo be a completely separate environment, or can demo players play against paid players just with limited options?
So they'll play against paid players, and I think that can lead to some negativity. So this kind of goes into geeking out about the market system. I don't know if you want to indulge me for a second with kind of how
Yeah,
it
no,
works.
please do. I find it really
So,
interesting.
really what happens with the market system is, let's say you've unlocked 20 characters, and there are 30 characters total. So you don't actually have access to 10 of them, whether it's because you haven't unlocked them or whether because you haven't paid for them, who knows? There's 10 characters you don't have. When I purchase a character in game, and I'm not talking about real money, I'm talking about, hey, I'm in round 7, I'm buying a character and it costs 10 gold. What happens is the database says, oh, okay, 10 gold, 10 points is allocated to this guy. Now, I have 19 other characters that I did not spend gold on. So therefore, their ratings are all going down by 10 divided by 19. So it's a zero-sum thing that's always happening. What that really means then is for the unlocked characters is that I'm never adjusting their price. The only people that are adjusting their price are the people who have actually unlocked them and paid for them. Why I think that's different than kind of pay to win, and why I think that means that you can have an environment where you have mismatches of how many unlocked characters are, is because now let's say I'm the player who has everything unlocked. And by the way, one of those 10 that I have unlocked that you don't is super overpowered. I'm going to play the crap out of it. And it's going to adjust in price up and up and up to a point where it's, again, balanced. Like it's no longer that good for the price. So even though you never had access to that market and you never had access to adjusting its price, by me having access to it and me playing it because it's so overpowered, the price still goes up relative to the other things. Now, the reason why it's not a perfect system as far as combating pay to win is because that doesn't take into account synergies that could possibly happen where I have more access to synergies that you don't have access to. So it's not a perfect system, but I think it gets pretty far along the way there, such that you can have mixed environments, or mixed pools of things all existing in the same environment without too much discrepancies.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It'll be, I mean, with a stock market, it's just impossible to know exactly what'll happen because like there's just, especially with that scenario you set up, like the first demo characters are going to have such a higher selection rate. So it'll do some interesting things there. So it'll be fun to kind of watch and see how that balances itself, to see if there's any back end things you end up having to change. Or do you think you, like through your playtesting, you feel pretty solid about everything, or you feel like you're going to be adjusting on the fly as the game releases?
No, I mean, it's been active for a while. It is, so the live mode is not active. That's still in testing with limited players. But anybody who has access to the playtest or I've sent keys to has access to the async. It's been crazy to see the market movements. Um, I hope I'm not boring down too much with some of the technical details of this, but there's also a fairly innovative way of matchmaking. The Bazaar and other things kind of matchmake based on player rating or random. In my opinion, for deck building and other games, that's not necessarily a great way to do it. It may be the only way you can really kind of do it, but it's not a great way because the deck building nature of those games means that sometimes I hit the nuts and sometimes I don't. And if I'm going against random players, for example, then sometimes I just go against players that hit the nuts, and there's just nothing I could do about that. It also means there's nothing I can really kind of counter and so on, but that's a different story. But the matchmaking for me, when I play on round 7 and I submit my team, what really happens is my team goes into a hidden 30-team tournament with 30 other round 7 teams.
Oh, interesting.
And this is on the server, so it plays the games against all those, and whichever one has the best win-loss record is considered the hardest round 7 team. Whichever one is the worst is considered the worst round 7 team. So what it means is that as a player, I have 30 levels of difficulties. So when I'm playing on difficulty 19 out of 30, I am facing all the 19th best teams to face. Doesn't matter who submitted them, doesn't matter the player. All that matters is the strength of the team itself. Sync has this kind of, the live will have just regular normal elo type things because you're actually going against somebody. My game has a lot of counters. It has things where I steal your minions, I weaken your minions, and so on. So it is very much an interactive type playstyle. In the async mode, those are cards that the live player has advantage to. The ghost player clearly doesn't. The ghost just sits there and takes whatever you give to it, which makes it so that the game is beatable on the highest difficulties. Because if you didn't have counters to everything, if I couldn't weaken your ghost characters, if I couldn't steal your ghost characters and so on, then I'm going to be facing every single round the very best team that has been made. There's just no chance of succeeding at that point. So because there's counters in that, I can go ahead and face all the harder teams and have answers to that. There's a long way of saying the market is so dislocated when new players come in that experienced players have a pretty easy time at the hardest difficulties, because the players aren't making good buying decisions, and you'll see the cost of something go down because they're ignoring it. And the good players are like, that's crazy. This spell is worth way more. I'm easily taking this. So for me, playing on difficulty 25 to 30 isn't that difficult. Whereas a new player may be struggling at difficulty 8 because they're still learning the system. So the skill expression absolutely comes into saying what is overvalued and what is undervalued, and how can I make these synergies kind of work together. So I wasn't sure if the market system was going to work. At this point, I don't see any need to do external adjustments, and it seems to be flowing well. I'm really excited to see the live portion because it's a different type of thing where we're now actively fighting against we're using the same market to fight against each other in things that have recently changed. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of plays out.
Yeah, for me, if I'm a player, do I choose that difficulty or is it a sort of self-selecting thing?
Right now, you just keep on ranking up and eventually you rank down. There probably will be an option where you can just choose to play a difficulty that you've unlocked. Just, if you want to just try an easier difficulty, there's no reason not to.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really clever system, this 1 through 30 in the background. That's super interesting. How does when you're playing async, is it just similar to doing a live where there's like X number of rounds and then winning all of those, you win the game? Is that how it works?
Yeah, other than the first few intro matches, the async, if you can get 10 wins before you get 3 losses. With the live PvP, you each start with essentially 5 health. And whoever loses the 5 health first, loses the game. So other than that, it's very similar, but it's one of those cases where you don't really want the games going to round 17 or something like that. The board's just full of chaos and yeah, so.
And then whenever I'm playing, you still talk about buying a unit from the shop. Is that just my deck whenever I start it determines what's in that instead of being a huge pool? Like, what am I choosing what to buy? And is there randomness in that? Or can I buy at any point and upgrade for any of my units?
Yeah, so before any game, you choose 8 minions and 8 spells. And within the game, you'll see 4 minions at a time and 4 spells at a time. When you purchase a minion, it gets replaced with a new minion so 1 out of 5, because you have 5 that it could be, it won't do duplicates. And same thing with spells. So there is relatively little randomness in the game. There's still randomness as far as, you have 8 and you're only seeing 4 at a time, but I think in general, your strategy outweighs most of the randomness. Now, minions do have evolution. So if I drag a level 1 cactus onto a separate level 1 cactus, then makes it level 2 cactus. So there is some sort of randomness in there, in that if I just purchase a cactus and another cactus shows up, I get an early upgrade that was much easier than my opponent may have gotten. So there is some sort of luck that goes into it. But compared to, I'd say, what is Magic now? 40 or 60 cards? I don't even remember.
60 for most constructed, and depends on the format.
And then Hearthstone, I think, is 30 cards. I'd say there's far more randomness in those type of games. And I'm not saying randomness is good or bad, but I would say there's relatively small amount of randomness, and it's more about your strategy kind of going into it. And then a lot of it's about the execution of that strategy, especially with spells where you're affecting the other team. It's sometimes, especially in the async mode, if you're going against a really difficult team, it's just better to take the loss instead of use up all your resources trying to take the win. It'd be better just to save those for the next round, take your loss, and then, continue forward.
Is there any kind of like economy in the game, like in TFT, if you save enough, you get more the next round, or is there anything like that too? Or did you
Not yet,
abandon that?
there are relics in the game. So the 2 relics that exist in the game currently are an annuity. So when you choose your spells, one of the spells you can choose is something that creates an annuity, and that's something that's present every game, or present every round. At the start of the round, you get 2 extra gold. The other relic is something that allows you to put more minions on the board. And I think when people learn that, they say, well, of course, I'm definitely going to want more minions on the board. I don't know. It depends how much that spell costs. If it costs 12, then probably
Right.
not. If it costs 4, then yeah, absolutely. But not only that, but are there low cost minions right now? Are there any 1 or 2 cost minions? Because if there are, then yeah, you're probably gonna want more minions. So there's relationships between the 2 that you have to weigh. But I'd say where the game is relatively weak right now is that a lot of the units are very combat oriented, and I want more player churn. I want more player economy. I want more buying, selling, salvaging, all this kind of stuff to go over and over again, because I think that's the part that's really fun. That's the part that really makes you feel like you're building kind of a machine, or you identified some series of things that, when played together, they can really kind of create these cool combinations. So the new minions that are coming in, well, there's a couple more combat ones, but after that, it's going to be a pure focus on non-combat, terrible combat statistics, but they do just kind of interesting things. And again, I kind of goes back to, I don't necessarily need to worry about the power level stuff. I need to worry about whether it's an interesting effect or not. There's one spell I recently added where it just refreshes your store of minions. There's no refresh button. So just your 4 go away and 4 new random ones pop up. One of the better players on there is the only one playing that spell, really. So the spell's very cheap because nobody else is really playing it. But he's creating monster teams because he's getting so much value out of getting his cheap evolves and stuff like that. So that's the stuff that I like to see, that I want to see more of. And I like to see that a skilled player is recognizing, hey, if these are used in combination and these are relatively low cost, this is the time to do it. Because as soon as everybody else figures out that that spell is really powerful and it goes up in price, you got to stop. You got to pivot to a different strategy and try to figure out what the new meta is.
Yeah, well, I'm super excited to see what happens with the game. You've clearly spent a lot of time thinking about it, and it's always fun to follow a novel project, something that's trying interesting things. Before I let you go, I'll end you with this final question. This is the Dream podcast, as you know, because you've mentioned you listened to several, but it was created to inspire myself and others by hearing about what other developers have going on and what inspires them. So I'm curious for you, Charlie, what would you say is your game dev dream in this season of life?
So I've definitely heard you ask this question a lot of times. And usually the question is like, what do you mean season? So I thought about it a lot. I'll define my season as this year. And I think my dream this year is to have a game that lots of people like, and there's a community that's built that people want to see more, and they're suggesting, hey, let's do this minion, this spell, and it's just a community that's kind of growing around the game, because it's something I put thousands of hours into, so much thought, so much mental energy, And I think there's potential for interesting experiences for players. And I could be wrong. I mean, who knows? Maybe players will say this is not that interesting. But the dream is that they will find it interesting, and then we'll kind of build this world together to a certain degree and just see what kind of like fun interactions and fun things we can create. So
Well, Charlie, that's a fantastic dream. I hope you're able to make it a reality. And thanks for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
thanks, Blake. I appreciate it.
Yep. If you could stay on for just 1 second, it does.
Thank you for watching this entire episode with my friend Charlie. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you're still sticking around and you have not subscribed yet, please consider doing so. It really helps the channel. Also, if you're looking for more great game dev content, I really think you'll enjoy this episode that's on the screen right now. See you later, my friend.